Good morning, everyone, and happy Mother's Day to all our mothers here. Thank you. So I'm sure some of you are buying Mother's Day gifts. One thing that all mothers don't need are alarm clocks because they're always up anyways, and they never sleep. So that's the only gift you never have to worry about getting your mother, is an alarm clock. They say that a mother's golden age is when the kids are too old to need a babysitter and too young to borrow your car. And they also say that the smartest advice on raising children is to enjoy them while they're still on your side. And the best advice that you can give to mothers is to once in a while pretend that you are senile. Why? So you can get back at your children, because you often give them very clear instructions and they seem to never understand what you're saying. So happy Mother's Day to all of you. I'm sure you have much better advice than I have to give to you this morning. But if I were to ask you today, how is your Easter? You would probably say, do you mean how was your Easter? It's too bad that a few days after Easter, most people feel that Easter is over. This is the same problem that we have around Christmas. 2 days after Christmas Day, people start taking down their decorations and think that Christmas is over. And they forget that Easter and Christmas are not just individual days, but actually in the church we celebrate them as entire seasons, a particular area. That is why it's important to keep in touch with the church's liturgical year. Liturgical years is our celebrations and how we celebrate those different events. Long after most people have taken down their decorations, we as a church in our liturgical year continue to celebrate Christmas for 12 days until the feast of the Theophany, that is the baptism of Christ. And our Easter celebrations, or our Paschal celebrations, last even longer. They extend for 40 days from Easter Sunday all the way to the ascension of Christ, when he ascended into heaven. In verse 3 of the opening chapter of the Acts of the Apostles, St. Luke says, "To the apostles, Jesus presented himself alive after his passion by many proofs, appearing to them during 40 days and speaking of the kingdom of heaven." Very often people think Jesus rose from the dead and then he disappeared. And that's why for the last few years we've been focusing on resurrection accounts of Jesus. After his resurrection, Jesus repeatedly appeared to the apostles, and St. Luke tells us he actually appeared and taught them for a period of 40 days. And so in the church, liturgically, we celebrate this time of extended Easter, the Easter season, for 40 days. So these 40 days between Jesus' resurrection and ascension into heaven were very important for the disciples, because Jesus spent time teaching and also strengthening them for the important mission they were to have in the world. We are still in the Easter season. Therefore, the more accurate question is, how is your Easter going? Our initial response could be, during this time of Easter, we saw friends, we saw family, we consumed a lot of food, and we ate so much chocolate that we actually feel like an Easter bunny is still jumping in our stomach. The celebration of Easter, of course, should focus on much more than these externals, although those are important, getting together with family and friends and coming to church and celebrating. The last 3 Sundays, we read different Gospels of Jesus' resurrection, and today's Gospel from the Acts of the Apostles and the Gospel of St. John both focus on healings, and healings where Jesus and the apostles say a word that actually resembles the resurrection. Get up, arise. These two readings today, the Acts of the Apostles and the Gospel, have a very close connection. In the Gospel, Jesus heals a man who had been paralyzed for 38 years. Jesus first asks him, do you want to be healed? Then the Gospel of John tells us, Jesus said to him, rise, take up your pallet and walk. And at once the man walked and was healed, and he took up his pallet. Jesus healed many people during his life. But today's gospel focuses not only on Jesus' power to heal, but the ability of the apostles also to heal in the early church, and also to raise people from the dead. And these are all the stories that we can read about in the Acts of the Apostles. Jesus told his disciples while he was alive that whoever believes in him will be able to do greater things than even he was able to do. In the Gospel of John, chapter 14, he says, truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than these will he do, because I go to the Father. Whatever you ask in my name, I will do it, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it. It's for this reason that today we have readings that focus on healings. Not only Jesus' healing, but also the apostles' healing. The healing ministry of Jesus was not over when he died and rose from the dead. It continued in the early church, and healing remains possible today in many ways in our life. The Acts of the Apostles tells us that Aeneas had been bedridden for 8 years and was paralyzed. The section then continues. Peter said to him, Aeneas, Jesus Christ heals you. Rise and make your bed. And immediately he rose. And all the residents of Lydda and Sharon saw him, and they turned to the Lord. Once again, the extension of the healing ministry of Jesus. From Lydda, Peter then goes on to Joppa, where a woman disciple named Tabitha had died. And the Acts of the Apostles tells us, Peter put them all outside and knelt down and prayed. Then turning to the body, he said, Tabitha, rise. And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. These readings remind us that Jesus' resurrection should have a real effect on our day-to-day lives, and that his message continues to have very practical effects in our life. The Easter season needs to be for us a time not only of spiritual renewal, but also of spiritual growth. That's why during this time it's especially important to read the Acts of the Apostles. If you haven't read it before, start tonight. Start reading the Acts of the Apostles and begin to see the fruits of the resurrection, how the resurrection affected the apostles, and how the community began to grow in those early years. How our Easter is going will depend on how much of that message that Christ lived, that the apostles lived, is lived by us today. If you were Aeneas, who had been paralyzed for 8 years, then suddenly got healed, how would your Easter season be going? If you were Tabitha and had died, and then through the prayers of St. Peter opened your eyes again, how would your Easter season be going? If you were a man paralyzed for 38 years, then began to walk again, how would your Easter be going? Easter is never over if we are humble enough to recognize our many weaknesses and allow Jesus to heal us and allow Jesus to raise us up, whatever it is that is bringing us down. It's nice to be healed physically. And unfortunately, when I say healing, most often people think of physical ailments. But actually, it's more important to think of being healed spiritually. Our world needs physical healing, but our world more than ever needs spiritual healing, because we need to learn how to love, how to forgive, how to sacrifice as Jesus sacrificed, and how to show mercy as Jesus showed mercy. When our heart is incapable of doing this, then we are worse than a man or woman who is paralyzed. And it's specifically in those moments that we need healing. So, how is your Easter going? Hopefully it is good, not only because you ate a lot, not because you spent a lot of time with your family. How is your Easter going? Hopefully it is good because you prayed for yourself, for your family, and for the world. How is your Easter going? Hopefully, the resurrection of Christ will continue to remind us to rise from whatever is holding us back from a life of faith that is exciting because it is real in what we do and, more importantly, who we are as children of the risen Christ.